All right. Welcome back to our online session, the last period, the last class for today. So, in this lecture, we shall uh, we shall discuss about British Prose-II. Okay. So, this is the you know the continuation of that first year, first semester's British Prose-I. So, which means you'll be studying, essays, lectures, non-fiction, non-fiction writing by like British, authors, British authors like whom, like you can see one here, Thomas Carlyle, something like that. There are many more writers. I will introduce you to later in this lecture. So now, for today's discussion, we shall only focus on Thomas Carlyle. Block-1. Yes, we need 1 to 5. Okay. Now let's move on to lecture contents. This is the lecture contents. First, course overview of ENM 6 to 1 to 5, and then you need breakdowns of today's lecture of your block 1, unit 1 to 5, and learning goals. There is objectives and outcomes, and then discussion of units, in-depth discussion of unit 1 to 5 of block 1, and then questions. Then conclusion and next steps. All right. So now let's take a look at a course overview of ENM 6215 Prose, sorry, British Prose-II. So in this course, you'll have uh, this course has just like other courses. It has 4 blocks. Block 1 deals with Thomas Carlyle. Block 2 deals with George. Block 3 deals with Thomas B. Macaulay, and Block 4 deals with Virginia Woolf. So this course actually will help you how prose writers like engage with this history. See, as you can see, history, uh, society, politics, and intellectual debates. Okay. Before that, now let's look into the unit breakdowns of today's lecture. So in block 1 we have under Thomas Carlyle. Uh, First, in first unit we have Thomas Carlyle as a Victorian critic, and you need to deal with honor heroes, hero worship, the hero in history, in just the introduction part. And Unit 3 deals with hero as a poet, Dante and Shakespeare, for example. And Unit 4 deals with hero as man of letters, Johnson, Rousseau, Burns, some like that. And Unit 5 deals with hero as king, Cromwell and Napoleon. Okay, these are the things we shall discuss today. So now, learning goals. Let me just fit to it. I don't have to read them all. It will take time now. First, as you can see in the objectives, course objectives, so it will introduce you to prose writings of Thomas Carlyle and his role as a Victorian thinker. And second, concept of hero, worship, and leadership in history. So this thing also will be discussed, and also to examine how literature, leadership, and intellectual ideas influence society. And another last objective is to analyze Carlyle's ideas about poets, writers, political leaders as historical heroes. So now, what are the outcomes? What will you learn after having read, after going through this, prose writers, right? For example, Thomas Carlyle. So you'll be able to explain Carlyle's role as a Victorian critic and social thinker. Okay, just a minute. And you'll also be able to describe the main ideas in or on heroes, hero worship and heroic in history, and analyze Carlyle's views on poets, writers, leaders as influential figures. So yeah, you'll also be able to evaluate Carlyle's theories of heroic leadership in historical and social context. So these are the learning goals of today's lecture. Okay, so now we shall move to uh, the unit 1. Sorry, just a minute. Just a minute. Um, that is Thomas Cullen as as a Victorian critic. So now, as you can see here, let's slightly understand who Thomas Cullen was as a person and as a writer. So now, Thomas Collins Carlyle was born in 1795 and died in 1881. So, where was he born? In Scotland, right? In Scotland. So this means that he lived for at least for 86 years, about 86 years, most probably 86 years. You may calculate also for yourself. Uh, a remarkably long time by the standards of any era or and he spent most of those years thinking, writing, and engaging with the most important questions of his age. So Carlyle was not just a single kind of writer. He was a historian, which means he studied and wrote about history uh, and historical figures. So he was an essayist, which means he wrote a long, thoughtful pieces on social, political, and moral topics. And he was also a philosopher, so in a broad sense of the word, right? So someone who reflected deeply on the meaning of human life, society, and moral values. And most importantly for us in his course, is he was a social critic, someone who looked at the society around him and was not afraid to point out what was wrong and what needed to change. Okay, now what is the Victorian? What is the Victorian age? The Victorian age refers to the period in British history during the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901. So it was a time of enormous change. Britain was going through the industrial revolutions. Factories were being built, cities were expanding rapidly, machines were replacing human labor, and the economy was growing at a speed never seen before. On the surface, this looked like progress, but underneath, there were serious problems. So the rapid growth of of industry creates uh, uh, poverty among among whom among the working classes, people who were moving from village to cities, often living in a not terrible, terrible conditions. So there was a great inequality. The rich were getting richer while the poor struggled to survive. So social values were changing and not always for the better. Many people felt lost, confused, and without moral direction. So traditional beliefs and religious faiths were being questioned by new scientific ideas. So it was a time of deep uncertainty. Collins saw all of this, all of this very clearly. So he was deeply troubled by what he saw around him. He believed that modern society was losing its moral compass. So uh, it was becoming too focused on money, material wealth, and economic efficiency, and not enough on spiritual, values, courage, and genuine human connection. This is what he became such a powerful critic of his age. So uh, he was not, not content with happy to simply observe. He wanted to diagnose the problems of society and propose ways to address them. His ideas were, controversial, yes, controversial, challenging, and thought provoking. Even they see even see. If you go through in depth, if you go through in depth, into history, you will understand why even why we are studying even today, why this even relevant today. Okay, so go through it. So now let's what kind of criticism he does. So, in the previous slide, previous slide, we understood that the broad context of Thomas Carlyle's lives and times. So now let us go deeper into the specific nature of of his social criticism. What exactly did Carlyle criticize, and what ideas did he propose as solutions? So this is an important question, and in the slide before you, in a gives us a very clear understand of answer, right? So first, uh, let us talk about materialism, right? Materialism. What is materialism here? In a philosophical sense, it refers to the belief that the material things such as money, position, uh, physical comfort, and economic gain are the most important values in life. Carlyle believed that Victorian society had become deeply materialistic. So people were judging everything by its monetary value. So the questions was no longer is this right or good, but whether is it profitable? Is this profitable? Is it not even now here? Now, even in today? Don't you experience this? Is it right or good? But rather is this profitable? We are all concerned with this, right? So this represented for Carlyle as profound moral failure. So connected to materialism was utilitarian philosophy. Utilitarianism is a philosophical uh, school of thought associated with who? Let me tell you the name. Remember, Bentham. Jeremy Bentham. Okay, and John Stuart Mill. I don't know whether you have heard about this name though. Please remember. So which holds that the best action is the one that produces uh, the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So on the surface, this sounds reasonable, but Carlyle was, deeply critical of utilitarianisms, because he felt it reduced uh, human beings to calculating machines, always measuring pleasure and pain, cost and benefits, without any references to deeper moral values, spiritual meaning, or genuine heroism. So this is why, Carlyle famously called his age as the mechanical age. Okay, he meant that uh, not just the economy, but human thinking itself had become mechanical, cold, calculating, and without soul. Right? Machines here we were like dominating not just factories, but also human minds and hearts. People were becoming like cogs in the machines rather than free, moral, and spiritually alive beings. He was deeply alarmed by this development and wrote passionately about it in many of his essays. Okay, so his solution was to call for heroic, leadership. The idea that society needs great individuals with strong moral visions and spiritual depth to guide it. So we argue that machines like and systems cannot shape society. Only great human being can shape. Do you get it? So this is the seat of his famous theory of hero worship, which which we will explore, in the next year unit. Right? Interestingly, Carlyle's social criticism had a real impact on the writers who came after him. So great novelists like Charles Dickens, who wrote about poverty and social injustice in novels like Oliver Twist and Hard Times, were deeply influenced by Carlyle's ideas. I mean, Carlyle's philosophy. So John Ruskin, the great art critic and social thinker, was also shaped by Carlyle's moral vision. Okay, so John Ruskin, the great yes. So Carlyle was not just a thinker here. So he was a shaping force in Victorian literature and culture. Okay, so now let's move into his essays on heroes, on hero worships, and heroic in history. So now this was on heroes, on hero worship and a heroic in history. So this was published in 1841, right? So, but it did not begin as a book. Now, how it began? So it began as a series of public lectures that Carlyle delivered in London in 1840. So in the Victorian age, public lectures were a very important form of intellectual uh, engagement. So educated people would gather to listen to great thinkers speak on important topics, much like how we attend seminars or academic conferences today. So Carlyle was a powerful and passionate speaker, and his lectures attracted large, enthusiastic audiences. After lectures were delivered, he revised and published them as a book. That book is what we are studying even now. Okay, so now what is the central argument of this book on heroes, hero worship, and heroic in history? So the central idea is that Carlyle called, the great men hero of history. You know, this is a very bold and controversial idea. So, and it is important that you understand it clearly. So, according to this theory, history is not shaped primarily by economic forces. Okay, history is not shaped by primarily what economic forces, but social system or anonymous masses of people. Instead, history is shaped by the actions of exceptional individuals, great men who possess qualities that uh, others do not have: visions, courage, moral strengths, spiritual insights, and the ability to inspire and lead others. So Carlyle believed that these great individuals, whom we call heroes, are the true engines of historical change. When you look at a major turning point in history, you will find, according to Carlyle, a great man behind it. A prophet who brought a new religion, a poet who gave, voice to the deepest truths of human existence, a political leader who transformed a nation. Without these heroes, Carlyle believed history would, what is the word that, stagnate, and society would decline. History would stagnate, and society would decline. Okay, so this idea was, and continues to be debated. Critics have argued that Carlyle's theories ignores the importance of social, economic, and collective forces in history. Others have pointed out that his admiration for strong leaders can lead to a dangerous glorification of uh, authoritarianism. Okay, so these are valid criticism, and as students of uh, English literature and critical thought, you should keep them in mind as we study this. Okay. However, I also want like to say that uh, Garland's theory also contains, genuine insights. The idea that exceptional individuals can and do change the course of events is difficult to deny entirely. So the task of critical reading is to engage with these ideas thoroughly. So uh, never accepting them, blindly, nor diminishing, sorry, dismissing them without consideration. Okay. So next, so now Carlyle's concept of the hero. What is it? So uh, In the previous slide, we have understood the background and the central argument of what heroes, hero worship, and the heroic in history. Now let us go into more specific details about how Carlin, structures his idea of hero. So this is very important because the entire book is organized around Carlin's classification of heroes into six different types. So understanding the classification will help you organize your reading and analysis of the text. Carlin's identifies six types of heroes: the hero as divinity, the hero as prophet, the hero as a poet, the hero as a priest, the hero as man of letters, the hero as king. So each of these types represents a different historical period and a different way in which exceptional individuals have influenced society. So let us introduce each type here and that in the units that follow. So now let's begin with the hero. The hero as divinity represent the earliest form of heroism. The idea that in ancient time, great individuals were seen as divine or godlike, beings. So Norse mythology provides, countless primary examples here. The Hebrew prophet is represented by, prophet, Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, whom Carlin discusses as an example of a man with tremendous moral and spiritual power to transform an entire civilization. The hero is point which we will discuss in details in the in unit three. It is represented by Dante's and Shakespeare, and then express the deepest truths of human existence. The hero as priest is represented by Luther and Knox, the religious reformers who used their spiritual authority to challenge existing institutions. And the hero as a man of letters, which is in Unit 4, we shall discuss that, featuring Johnson's, Russell and Burns, writers, intellectuals who shape society through their ideas. And finally, in the Heroes as King, which is in Unit 5, we shall discuss. And in this discusses about political leaders, Oliver Cromwell and Napoleon, who shape history, through action and governance. So, what is the most common threat to the running all six types? For Colin, every hero, because of the specific form their heroism takes shares certain qualities, essential qualities. Heroes have genuine insight into the truth of things. They are sincere in their beliefs and convictions, and they have the courage to act on what they believe, even in the face of opposition. And they have the power to inspire others, like to awaken to in ordinary people a recognition of higher values and greater possibilities. So Carlin uh, also argues that heroism is not merely a matter of historical interest. Okay, it is a permanent human need. Every age and every society needs heroes. So this is why he argues. Uh, here, why he argues? He argues specifically for hero worship, not as a blind admiration, but as an recognition of genuine greatness and a willingness guided by it. So he believed that the ability to recognize and honor greatness is itself a sign of moral health in a society. A society that cannot admire genuine heroes, he argued, is a sick society. It's not well. So one that has lost the capacity for moral seriousness and aspirations. Okay, that's why he call it sick society. Okay, now let's move on to unit three. So here in unit three, we see Dante as heroic, as a heroic point. These are the two uh, what we will be focusing on in the subsequent units. So first is Dante and then Tom will Shakespeare. Okay, now let's begin with Dante. So for that, uh, now what is this? For Carlin, a poet is someone who possesses a very special, rare gift, the ability to see and express deep truths about human life, and that ordinary people feel and but cannot articulate. The word poetry here is used in the broadest sense. It refers not just to verse, but to any creative literary expression that penetrates beneath the surface of ordinary existence and reveals something profound about condition. So Carlyle believed that poets are heroic because they perform a spiritual function in society. So they reveal what he called the divine idea of the world. So underlying truth and meaning that runs through all human existence. Okay, sorry, not human existence, all human experiences. So in an age of materialism and mechanical thinking, exactly at the age of Carlin was living in, poets became especially important because they remind people that life is not just about money, machines, economic calculations. Life has a spiritual and moral dimension, and it is the poet's role to illuminate that dimension. So think about this idea in relation to your own experience of reading literature. So have you ever read a poem or a novel and felt it expressed something you had always felt? You tried, okay, but never been able to put into words. Maybe some novel really touch you, some literary writing. You try to see to it, okay. So that moment of recognition, the sense that a writer has captured something true and deep about your own experience is precisely what Carlyle is talking about. So great poets make the invisible invisible. So they give form to emotions, ideas, truth, and that otherwise remain vague and inarticulate. So Carlyle chooses two great examples to illustrate, uh, you know, the hero as poet. Okay, first Dante, the Italian, the Italian, you know, what is it? What is his name? Italian poet of the medieval period. Okay, so now let's simply jump into it. Now, now who is this person? Dante was an Italian poet, right? Who lived from 1265 to 1321. So he is widely considered one of the greatest writers in the history of world literature. His masterpiece is a long narrative poem called The Divine Comedy, Divina Commedia in Italian. So which is divided into three parts. The Inferno, uh, which describes hell, the Purgatory, which describes purgatory, and paradiso, which describes heavens. So the Divine Comedy is an uh, extraordinary work written in the early 14th century. It presents a detailed and imaginative visions of afterlife, guided by deep Christian theology and and medieval philosophy. So this is uh, more than a religious text. So it is a profound exploration of uh, justice, love, and um, not just that, redemption, and and the meaning of human life. So in a poem, in the poem, Dante himself, is the narrator and the traveler, guided first by the Roman poet uh, Virgil, so through hell and purgatory, and then by his beloved Beatrice through heaven. So the journey is both a literal narrative and an allegory. Okay, so what is this now? Allegory. Allegory is a symbolic, story about journey of human soul from sin and confusion toward moral clarity and divine love. Now, why does Carlyle admire Dante so deeply? Carlyle's admiration for Dante is centers on what he sees as Dante's extraordinary sincerity and moral visions. Okay. Now, Carlyle's believe that the greatest quality of any you know, hero is sincerity. So the quality of genuinely believing in and feeling deeply what one experiences. For Carlyle, Dante was not writing poetry as an intellectual exercises or as a display of technical, skills. He was writing because he felt the truth of his vision with every fiber of his, of his being. So the intensity and moral seriousness of the Divine Comedy reflects, like for Carlyle, a man who was genuinely committed to the truths he was expressing. Okay, now Carlyle also emphasizes that Dante was not just a literary figure; he was uh, uh, sorry, excuse me. Uh, Uh, Colin is why he was why he said that also besides because Dante was not just a literary figure. He was a moral guide for humanity. The Divine Comedy is in Colin's reading a kind of spiritual is a kind of spiritual map, a guide to understanding the consequence of our choices, the nature of sins and virtue, and the ultimate destiny of human soul. So by writing this poem, Dante uh, performed, heroic service for humanity. So he translated the deepest theological and moral truths of his age, so into a form that could be felt, imagined, and understood by ordinary human beings. Okay, so now what is next? Next is another poet, another. Actually, he wrote not only poet, he wrote so many things here. You know him very well. See, Shakespeare, right? Why? Why was you Shakespeare as one of the greatest poets? We read only about drama, right? Of his plays, sonnets. He's also a great poet. See, Shakespeare is not like limited to only one genre. He is beyond genre. Okay. So now having discussed Dante, we now turn to the second great examples of heroic poet. Who is it? William Shakespeare. So we don't need a like introduction even. Huh? We already know. We have a separate paper for this also, right? So popular. Okay. So now William Shakespeare, who lived from 1564 to 1616, he was see English playwright, right? Poet, an actor, and widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language, and arguably in world literature. So he wrote about, I have like this state today right, in the another course named Shakespeare, right? So he wrote about 37 plays, I said, right? And 154 songs. I'm repeating here. So several are longer poems. So his plays, including tragedies like Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Othello, some of the like comedies, Emmett Summer's Night Dreams, which we have discussed today, and much ado about, nothing and historians like Henry Fortin and William Finchers. These works have been performed continuously for over 2 centuries and even have been translated into virtually every language in the world. right? So, Carlin's admiration for Shakespeare is, profound, but it is based on a specific quality that he identifies. So, Shakespeare's, extraordinary understanding of human nature. So, Carlin describes Shakespeare as, possessing a unique insight into, the inner life of human beings. So, their inner emotions, their conflicts, their contradictions, and their deepest longings. So, in this sense, Shakespeare's, heroism as a poet lies in his psychological depth, his ability to create characters who feel completely real and completely human. So, think about the great Shakespearean characters you may have encountered, like Hamlet, torn between thought and actions, Macbeth, destroyed by ambition and guilt, Othello, consumed by jealousy, and Lear, undone by pride and gratitude of those he loves. So each of these characters represents dimension of human experience that is universal, and that can't across all culture, periods, and even individual differences. So this is what Carlyle means when he says that Shakespeare's reveals a universal truth about human experience, existence. So Shakespeare did not just write stories about people in 16th and 17th centuries England. He wrote about human beings, as such, about permanent, unchanging aspects of human psychology and moral experience. So, uh, for Carlyle, this this universality is the mark of the truest heroism in a poem. So Dante's heroism lies in his cosmic and spiritual visions, his ability to map the moral universe, and Shakespeare's heroism lies in his human and psychological rhythms. So his ability to map the inner universe of the human heart. So together, this poet represents for Carlyle the highest achievements of, of the heroic imaginations. And you continue, you know, and as you continue, okay, as you continue to study, in this course, keep Carlyle's framework in mind, because it will help you read great literary text, not just as aesthetic objects, but as an expression of your human intelligence and moral depth. Okay, so now let's move on to the next. Next is Unit 4, the hero as man of letters. So what is this? Let us first understand what Carlyle means by the term man of letters. In Carlyle's time, the term referred broadly to a person who devised their life to writing. So to producing books, essays, criticisms, and other forms of intellectual and literary works. So uh, the man of letters was not just a novelist or a poet in a narrow sense. He was a public intellectual, someone whose ideas and writings engaged with great social, political, and moral questions of his days. So in the Victorian era, writers and intellectuals employed a public prominence. It is perhaps difficult to imagine today. Uh, their books were read and enjoyed. Sorry. Read and debated widely. So their opinions were sought to sought on matters of public concerns, and their ideas genuinely shaped the discourse of society. So Carlyle places the men letters under this category of heroes because he believed that in the modern day, where traditional religious authority has been weakened, and where the printing press has made a widespread and circulation of ideas possible. Writers, intellectuals have taken on a role uh, that was once played by priests and prophets. The man of letters guides society through ideas, through the power of language and argument, and through the morals and spiritual visions embodied in his writing. So this is a profound observation that remains even relevant today. Think about how writers, journalists, academicians, and public intellectuals continue to shape the way we think about the world. So the specific media they have been changed. They have changed. We now have like blogs, podcast, and what we have social media alongside books and essays. But the fundamental functions of intellectual guides, guide remains. It always remains. So people who think deeply, write clearly, and escape honestly, or with no important questions uh, of their time, are still performing the heroic function, and that the Carlins describes. So yes, in this unit, Carlin focuses on three specific examples of heroic men of letters. First, as you can see here, Samuel Johnson, Jen Rosso, and Robert Burns. So we shall look into that. We shall look at each of them in more details. Okay, now let's move into that. So now let's begin with this Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson, who lived, from 1709 to 1784. Johnson was, mm, an English writer, critic, poet, and lexicographer. So which means he contributed, uh, he compiled dictionaries. So lexicography deals with something like the words, vocabulary, right? So he compiled dictionaries. So his most famous work is A Dictionary of the English Language, published in 1755. Which was the most comprehensive, English dictionary of its time, and remained the standard reference work for many decades. So Johnson was also the author of the famous series of critical essays like The Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets, as well as many other essays, poems, works of criticism. So he was a central figure uh, in literary and intellectual life of uh, 18th century England. So Carlin's admired Johnson for his moral seriousness, his intellectual discipline, and his total commitment uh, to truth and honest thought. And Johnson was a man who faced enormous personal difficulties, poverty, illness, and depression, and yet continued to work with extraordinary, intensity and uh, convictions. For Carlin, you know, this combination of moral seriousness and personal courage made Johnson a true intellectual hero. Okay, so next is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who lived from 1712 to 1778. So Rousseau was a Swiss French philosopher and writer whose ideas had an enormous impact on European and global thought. So yes, most important works include like the social contract, okay, which begins with the famous line about man being born free but everywhere in chains, and Emily and a revolutionary work on education, and also ideas about freedom, equality, and relationship between an individual and society were uh, uh, enormously influential. So they helped to inspire the French Revolution of 1789, one of the most significant events in modern history. So Carlin admired Rousseau's passionate commitment to truth and freedom, even as he was also critical of some of the consequences of Rousseau's ideas. So for Carlin, Rousseau represents a man of letters whose ideas have power to transform not just minds, but entire society and historical events. So, uh, our next is Robert Burns. Was born from 1759 to 1796, right? Burns was a Scottish poet, widely regarded as the national poet of Scotland. He wrote in this Scots dialect of English, and his poems celebrate about lives, feelings, and experiences of ordinary rural people like farmers, laborers, common folk. So his most famous poems and songs include like all like same to a mouse uh, and a red rose, something like that. And Colonel had a special admiration for Burns because Burns was, in a sense, the most unlikely hero, a poor farmer's son who had, no formal education yet produced poetry of the highest, quality. So both represent the heroism of national genius. So the idea that, uh, true greatness does not depend on wealth, privilege, formal education, but uh, on the genuine power of human soul to feel deeply and express truthfully. So, so these people like Johnson, Russell, and would illustrate three dimensions of intellectual heroisms. Okay, that Carlos identifies moral seriousness and disciplines, the power to transform society through revolutionary ideas, and the natural geniusness uh, that speak directly to human experience. As we study, you know, this series, think about which of these dimension of heroism you find most compelling, and also why. Okay, and that reflection will help you to get more deeply into uh, Carlin's text or book writing. Okay, now let's move on to the sorry, last topic. Sorry, where is it? Where is not moving? This is the last unit. Then we stop. Okay. So now, unit five deals with the hero as king, Cromwell and Napoleon. So now, this is the last topic. So far, what we have discussed so many things about types of hero. Now, here we'll deal with the hero as king, the discussion of political leaders as heroic figures. So let us understand why Colonel includes political leaders among his categories of heroes. For Colonel, history is made by exceptional individuals and political leaders. Perhaps are perhaps the most visible and direct agents historical change, spiritual life, right? And a poet transform cultural and emotional life, and a man of letters transform intellectual life, and a king of political leader transform the material and institutional conditions of an entire society. So political use in Colonel's framework are individuals who have the vision, the will, and the strength to take control of historical events and direct them toward what they believe is the right outcome. So, like Oliver, Cromwell lived from 1599 to 1658. So he was an English military and political leader who played a central role in the English Civil War of the 1640s, which led to the execution of King Charles and establishment of the republic, the Commonwealth of of England for a period of about a decade. So, Cornwall served as Lord Protector of the Commonwealth from 1653 until his death in 1658. So he was a deeply complex figure, a man of strong Puritan religious conviction, who believed he was acting in accordance with God's will, but also ruthless military commander who made controversial and sometimes brutal decisions. So Carlos wrote extensively about Cromwell in a separate work titled Oliver Cromwell's Letters and Speeches. So he admired Cromwell as a man of genuine moral and religious conviction who had the courage to act decisively in a time of crisis. So Napoleon, from 1769 to 1821. So he was a French military leader and political figure, just like Cromwell. So he was also a political figure. So who rose to power in the aftermath of French Revolution and became Emperor of France. So Napoleon, transformed French society, codified French law in the famous, Napoleonic Code, and created a vast empire against much of Europe. So he was ultimately defeated and exiled. But his impact on all history was a profound and lasting. And Carlin saw Napoleon as a hero of modern time, a man of extraordinary energy, so intelligent, and immersed who emerged from humble origins to reshape an entire continent. However, Carlin also noted that uh, Napoleon heroism was ultimately incomplete. His greatness was partly undone by personal ambition and lack of deeper spiritual values that created breakthrough heroism. Okay, uh, so now is critically with Carlyle's admiration for these politically figures. So modern scholars and critics have rightly pointed out that Carlyle's separation of strong leadership can come dangerously close to authoritarian thinking. Then the idea that in a single powerful individual has the right to impose his will on society regardless of democratic processes or individual rights. So this is a serious criticism that we would not dismiss. So at the same time, Cullen's observations uh, that political leadership requires genuine vision, moral seriousness, and the courage to act in difficult circumstances is not like without merit. So as critical readers, your task is to as it to your task is to hold both of these perspectives in mind. So to appreciate what genuinely insightful in Carlos' analysis, while also recognizing and questioning its limitations. Okay, so with this we complete block 1 of British Prose-II. Okay, now let's move on to the questions. These are the 4 questions for you to attempt to show. So based on your understanding of this, lecture or this plot, so please try to attempt these questions. There are 4 questions. Like first is why Thomas Cullen considered an important Victorian critics and explain. And second, explain Cullen's concepts of hero worship. And third, how does Cullen describe poets like Dante and Shakespeare as heroic figures, and why does Cullen writers such as Johnson and Rousseau as men of letters? Okay, so these are the questions. Now, so what have we completed today? In today's lecture, we have completed or discussed uh, what about Thomas. At first, we introduced about Thomas Carlyle, right? About his ideas about heroism and leadership in history, and then we discussed about Carlyle as Victorian critic, and his theory of hero worship, and the poet, and the hero as a poet, writer, and political leader. So just like this, you know, we saw that Carmel, believed that exceptional individuals play a powerful role in shaping society and history. Okay, so that's all about block 1. So in the next lecture, we shall move to block 2, George Orwell. So I hope you heard about George Orwell, right? You know, Orwell was an I can just briefly tell you, but was an 20th century writer who confronted the political tyrannies these days like fascism, Stalinism, and imperialism. So with extraordinary honesty and moral clarity. So we shall be discussing such things, and this will help you the contrast between in understanding the contrast between the Carlyle and George Orwell. Okay. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, if you don't have any questions, then we can stop here for today. Okay. All right then. Thank you so much. See you in the next